It's like, what is the fastest speed that I can hold for 8 miles? Or even better, let's do a cut down run, right? I'm going to start at A, and every mile is going to be faster for 8 of them. And the goal is to get as fast as possible on your average speed. It's like a great challenge. And what you learn in that is how to adjudicate the effort, right, you put into something, right? And you learn like not to go too fast, and you learn not to go too slow. And like the habits of mind that you force through like a pacing workout or a cut down workout are so valuable in like everything in life, because okay, here are the things I have to get done today, right? These are the number of, this amount of time I have to get these things done. This is the amount of free time I have. This is the amount of like, these are the meetings I have. Okay, now let me adjudicate what I'm going to do and what I'm going to do now. It's not that different, right? And there's skills that you learn going out on that threshold run that are really helpful.
That was Nicholas Thompson today, back on the Running Effect podcast, and this time with a brand new book called The Running Ground, A Father, a Son, in the Simplest of Sports. And if you're unfamiliar with Nick, he's a runner, writer, and the CEO of The Atlantic. He's also remarkably fast. You guys won't believe it. At 44, he ran a blistering 2:29:12 marathon in Chicago. At 46, he set the American 45 to 49 age group record in the 50K, running 3 hours and 4 minutes. And in April 2025, at 50, he won the Lake Waramaug, I'm definitely not saying that right, 50 mile in 5 hours and 43 minutes. He regularly commutes to work and has just this wealth of depth and knowledge that he distills into his new book, The Running Ground, which I personally am very much enjoying reading. And so today's conversation dives into his relationship with his father, which the book centers around a lot, even on the book cover, as a father, a son, in the simplest of sports. And so we dive into his relationship with his father, his relationship with the sport, his relationship with his kids, work, discipline, future things. Love this conversation. I hope you guys do as well. If you do, share it with a friend. Word of mouth marketing is the easiest way in which we can grow. Give us a 5-star review. It takes 3 seconds to hit that button and hit the follow button so you don't miss more conversations like this in the future. I hope you guys are doing amazing. Appreciate you all, like, genuinely. Do not take it for granted that you spend time with me and listen to me and my guests. Apologies if I sound a little sick right now. It's because I'm dealing with a little bit of a sore throat. But yeah, appreciate you all being here, listening to this conversation. It's a fun one. And thank you so much for following the podcast. It means the world. Without further ado, enjoy this amazing conversation with the man, the myth, the legend, Nicholas Thompson. Ladies and gentlemen, he is back, this time with a brand new book. It's called The Running Ground, A Father, a Son, in the Simplest of Sports, written by the man of the hour, Nicholas Thompson. Nick, welcome back, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Dominic? It's great to see you again.
Great to see you as well. A lot has changed in my life. A lot has changed in your life since we last spoke. What was the inception of this book? I speak to authors frequently, and they'll talk about sometimes they get an idea, they start writing, and it's published a year later. A lot of times they think about it for 30 years and then it gets iterated 5 times and then it comes out. What was the process for you?
This book took 5 years. I mean, I have this complicated day job, so it kind of interrupted my writing process. I decided to write it back in 2020 when I went through this period where I went from being reasonably fast, running 240 marathons, to being very fast, to running 229. Thinking through why I had gotten faster, and then realizing that the reasons I'd gotten faster were pretty deep and interesting and involved the death of my father and the way I had processed a big medical scare when I was 30. And so what really happened was realizing the complexity of what made me fast, made me want to write a bigger book about running, what makes us fast, what makes us slow, and what the sport can teach us about real stuff in life, not just getting quicker, but actually understanding yourself. And so that's when I started, and then it took forever, but it's out now.
What was the process of hitting the, I'm not an author, so I don't quite know the verbiage, but the manuscript, sending it in? Like, did you feel a weight off your shoulders once it was kind of into the ether and like, okay, I'm done?
Well, no, not at all. So I start writing the book in, right around, I guess it would have been the summer of 2020. So COVID summer. And I have a draft by the summer of 2023. And that's when I start sending it to friends, right? And the good thing about, I've been a journalist my whole life. I worked at the New Yorker for 6 years. I worked at Wired. I worked at the Atlantic. Like, my whole social circle is like amazing editors. And so I start sending the book to people, and then begins like a 2-year process of refining, changing, scrunching, removing, adding, twisting, changing, reordering. I have these like endless Google Docs trying to make everything chronological, sequential, make it as tight as possible. So there was never a moment where it was like it wasn't like the book is either done or not done. It was like the book was in different stages of done for years.
What's the most unique process of writing your own thing, right? You've talked about all these titles you've had, the different places you've worked, the people you've been surrounded by who are all excellent writers. What was it like to take all of this knowledge, take all of this experience, and put it into writing and articulating your own story?
I'll give you one story that I think is super interesting. So the hard part about this book is that it covers my life, it covers my father's life, and then it covers the lives of 5 other people who kind of put in stark relief the big issues of the book, who experience the things I experienced, but experience them to an extreme. And they're all people I knew and competed with. They're not people I found on Wikipedia. And so I have all of this material and it doesn't line up chronologically. It doesn't, like, the characters don't know each other. There's no easy sequential way to do it. And there's also no simple narrative arc. There's no like act 1, act 2, act 3. It's not like Nick wanted to run up the mountain, couldn't run up the mountain, then ran up the mountain, right? It's not like it's not a simple script. And so there are all these problems putting together. So to give you a specific example, I had an introduction. It says, here's what this book is about, right? And then I got into my life and my father's life. And I had this wonderful editor, Larissa McFarquhar. It's one of my favorite magazine writers. She works at the New Yorker. And she's like, Nick, love this book's great. But no one's going to read past chapter 1 because they don't care about you and they don't know what this book is about. You have to make it clear that this is a book about running and what happens in the mind of a runner and like the emotions of runners. And so, she and I talked about how to do that because, if you start with Nick at age 5 or you start with Nick's grandfather, you start Nick's dad, you can't do that. And she was like, you should start with a race. Like, do a minute by minute description of what happens in your body in a race. And do that first. And then you can go into the chronology and then you can go into the story. I was like, oh, that's a great idea. But then I had a hard time choosing which race. Like, which race did I have the most interesting thoughts? Which race can I begin with that really like sets up the themes of the book? And so I think I tried with like 3 different races. Like, you don't want to start with one at the end of the book when I've gotten fast, because then you're kind of giving away what happens. You don't want to start with the first marathon, A, because I don't remember anything about it, and B, because it like doesn't really thematically set it all up. And so I ended up choosing the 2007 New York Marathon. I ran the 2005 New York Marathon fast, then I'd been diagnosed with cancer, gone through hell, come back. 2007 New York Marathon, I run the exact same time I'd run in 2005. So there's like a real emotional payoff. And it gets you into my head, and then it also gets you into like the mind of a runner. And I was able to kind of describe the conversations every runner has when they're thinking about quitting or not quitting or dropping out, or what pain means, or what you're feeling, or what's going on as you run a race like the New York Marathon. So I thought that was a great insight from Larissa, and it led to a much better beginning to the book.
Something I want to ask you about in relation to the book, because I know the book covers a lot of this, but also outside of the book, running is such a fascinating topic. It's such a fascinating sport. It's such a fascinating act where it's so simple. It's the simplest of sports.
Yeah.
Literally, it's one foot in front of the other, and you don't need anything. You could be in Africa running naked without shoes, and you'd be like just another person. But it's also so complex if you want it to be.
Yeah.
Right? Talk to anyone at the New York City Marathon and ask them about their training, and they'll tell you about the bicarb and the gels and the 7 pairs of training shoes, and it can be a remarkably complex sport. And then even within runs themselves, the thoughts you have, the experiences you have, the strangers you pass can be remarkably complex, or it can be remarkably simple. How do you think about these themes and specifically distilling them down into writing about a book about the experiences of running and running?
Yeah, you got at one of the core things, right? It is this beautiful, simple sport, right? You just go out the door. You don't need anything. You don't need anyone. You can do it anytime you want, right? And that, as I write in the book, it's that simplicity that opens up complexity because it's all you. The failures and successes all come down to you. So what I try to do when I run, and what I tried to get across in the book, is that I have different modes, right? I have like a mode where I'm obsessive, right? And I have spreadsheets, and they're like spreadsheets on when I'm going to take my gels and how much water I'm going to take. And, in a race, what I want my heart rate to be at miles 26 through 34, right? and I sort of measure body temperature and power and all that. And I like analyze the shoes beforehand. And so I have that mode. But then I have another mode, which is, where I just turn that off, right? And I try to like imagine I'm floating above the runner, right? And where I can no longer bear the intense focus and I can no longer handle it. And so I learned to, completely dissociate. So I just ran the New York City Marathon, right, 2 weeks ago. And terrible day, right? I just felt terrible beforehand. Something was wrong physically, probably something wrong with my respiratory system. And I had all these like charts and like plans and paces. And then I was probably coming down the Queensboro Bridge. I was like, lights out on all that. And so then I just turned my stopwatch to say what time of day it was. And like, imagine I was floating above, and it was just like continuous forward motion. Eventually you'll be at Tavern on the Green, Nick.
Something and a concept I want to dive into and have you talk about to the audience, because it's a core theme of your book, is your relationship with your dad, and where running plays a role in that. And I had a conversation with Coach Mike Smith recently on the podcast. It was one of my favorite conversations I've ever had. Debatably the most successful.
He's really smart.
So
he's like
smart.
Operating at a different level. Yeah.
So smart, so articulate, such a great storyteller. And we dove into a theme on the podcast I never with anyone else, which is like, what are your motivations for getting in the sport? Because he deals with 18 to 22-year-olds who are developing, they leave home. And a lot of these kids for the first time might realize, well, I'm running away from something, I'm curious to have you share some of your experiences of why running, your experience within it, and maybe the complex nature of how it weaves into the storyline with your father.
Yeah. I mean, initially I was running toward my father, right? So I start running when I'm 5 or 6, and it's because he wants to do it with me. And when you're a little kid like that, you just want to spend time with your parents. You want to spend time like where your parent appreciates you. And my dad wasn't there all the time. He's in the process of realizing he's gay. He's heading to a divorce. He's in Washington all the time. But sometimes he's at home with us in Boston, and then those times he wants to run with me, right? And so that's amazing, right? And those are great memories. And that's where I start. And then he goes away, and we still run together sometimes when I go and visit him and spend a couple weeks with him a year, and we run all the time. But I'm not a runner, right? I don't think of myself as a runner. I was like, I play soccer, I play tennis, I play basketball. In high school, then I become a runner, right? I get cut from the basketball team. I've got nothing else to do, so I join the track team, right? And then it turns out I'm good. And then running is, it's accidental. Like I didn't get into it because I was trying to like process pain, or I didn't get into it because I was trying to find myself. I got into it because I had nothing to do, but then it became a great source of self-confidence, right? And so then I get deeper into the sport it's self-actualization, right? It's finding my place in the world. It's finding my place at this competitive high school. It's, doing something that the other kids think is cool. And it's like being good at something. And so it's really about self-realization when I'm in high school. Then I go to college, I kind of fail off the track team. In my 20s, I'm kind of a bust as a runner. But I'm chasing after something in those years in the 20s. I'm kind of chasing after, it's not a coincidence that I was trying to run a marathon in 3 hours, which had been my father's goal, right? Again, I'm like sort of running for my father. And then I have another breakthrough. I start running 240s, and I'm like, then at that point, I'm chasing like the feeling of being alive, right? And this is like having come through my cancer. I'm running hard because I want to just remember that I'm alive, that I'm strong, that I'm here, right? And I'm running in the woods because I want to like sort of get closer to nature. And now, now I'm 50, I've run these much faster times. I've run some really good races. Now I'm running for multiple reasons, right? Part of it is the same self-confidence thing as before, right? I'm good at it. I like doing it. But some of the reasons are deeper, right? I'm running to allow myself to mourn my father who passed away in 2017. I'm running to try to reach a different spiritual plane that I can't reach all the time. I'm running to release myself from the pressures of, working this intense job in New York City. So I now have like a much deeper relationship to the sport than I did at earlier stages.
What are the biggest takeaway messages you want people to walk away with who read the book, or takeaway messages you've heard from people who have read the book in regards to their own relationship with their father or parent?
So the question people often ask is like, how did you forgive this guy, right? This guy, my father lives this incredible life, right? He comes from a sort of hardscrabble background in Oklahoma. He makes it, he like works, fights his way to get into these great schools, makes it into the American meritocracy, you marries into this incredible family. He's tapped. John F. Kennedy says he's going to be president. Like everybody thinks he's Stanford dean, says he's the best student who's been there since Herbert Hoover, wins a Rhodes Scholarship, and then his life sort of falls apart, comes out of the closet, has this terrible sex addiction. And then, his life ends when he's, running a brothel in Bali and like mooching money off me and threatening suicide. And he's like this impossible guy. He's like calling hookers to my apartment when I'm there. He's writing all these awful things. And so one of the questions that I'm often asked is, how did you forgive that guy? Right? Like, look at all the pressure he put on you. And, the lesson of the book is that I forgave him because he loved me. Absolutely. Right. I never doubted that he did. I never doubted that he wanted the best for me. Like, even if he's acting in inappropriate ways. And so that's a lot of people don't have a father, right? They don't have, like, their father leaves and disappears, right? You don't even know who their father is, right? It happens all the time. The history of men as fathers in our last generation is not a great one. I mean, some were great. But I had one who really loved me and really looked out for me. I, am willing to forgive a lot for that. And so I've had, many people have written me, the book's only been out 2 weeks, but many people have written to me about their parents, both saying, similar situation. My father taught me to run. My father left. My father was really hard. I was glad to read your story of forgiveness. I think the question of how did I forgive him is the one that's been coming up the most in the letters I've gotten.
What's the power of forgiveness as someone who has experienced it? And I'm sure you have friends or family or other people who you've experienced the contrary, which is people who hold on to resentment. And I've firsthand experienced myself, as well as seen other people, how that emotion, resentment, just kills people.
It can be really hard to hold on to resentment. Sometimes you can't, right? I mean, sometimes you can't let it go. Like the pain is too hard, or the sin, or you've been aggrieved too much. You can't think about the person without thinking about the thing they did that hurt you, or the thing they did that hurt your friend, or the thing they did that hurt your other family member. But what happens when you forgive is you just unclench your mind, right? And you become you're able to sort of walk around a little more freely. Every resentment, everybody you haven't forgiven, everything you hold on to tight, every anger you have, puts a little cost on you. And, there are people who, there's like people who don't really matter in my life, who have done things that I haven't forgiven, but there's no one who matters in my life who I haven't forgiven. So, it does. That's why it's a central tenet of religion, right? It's much easier if you can process it and you can work through it and you can think through, and there's good on the other side of all the darkness. Then I think you live a healthier life.
How do you think about your experience growing up with your dad, and specifically how he parented you in the sport of running with your own son? I know you write about that, talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so different because my dad, we spent whatever, I don't know, 20 days a year together, and we had dinner 30 times, right? And my kids, I'm with all the time, right? Like all the time, right? And like my dad didn't know how to change a diaper, right? Like I spent I changed 10,000 how many diapers you change? How many diapers you actually change? Like 3,000, 5,000. Yeah, probably changed thousands of diapers. And it's just such a totally different relationship. But what I try to do for my kids, so there are some things that he did that I copy. He took me everywhere, right? My dad had an interesting life. He would take me to Japan with him, and I would meet the foreign minister, right? When I was a little kid, right? If he was having lunch with the senator, he would try to get me to come, right? And he wanted me to see this world. And I did. And it was great. And I do that with my children, right? Everywhere I go, if they want to go and I can pull them out of school, take them out of school. Like, Dad's going to this interesting conference. He's going to be meeting these incredible folks. Come with me, right? I got my eldest son invited to this amazing dinner next week, right? And it's going to be 12 like icons of AI and my son. And he's going to learn things, And so I learned that from my father. Um, you know, my father pushed me in ways that I don't push my kids. Um, in that he, what I try to do is like what I liked from him was he had complete confidence, right? He like really thought like anything that I went into, I was the best. Like surely, like you'll get the best grades in your school. Surely you'll win every award. Surely you'll win a Rhodes Scholarship. But it's not true. Um, but I think I liked that as a kid, like knowing that this person like believed in you. And so I have that with my children. What he did that I don't do is, he made it clear that if I got an A minus, that was unacceptable. And that I don't do with my kids. I mean, I think I benefited from him. I think it pushed me to work harder. But I don't do that with my children the way he did.
How do you balance the subjects of standards with expectations?
Yeah, that's a good question. With my children, right? Like there are standards you do have. Like I try very hard, like make it clear, like you do have to, like you did file everything on time. Like you don't have a choice. Like you can't back out of this. You should take the hardest classes. You should like push yourself the hardest. You should like, work all the time. Here I'll try to help you understand how to have better study habits and how to do. But also like the most important thing is that you do your best, that you treat people kindly, that you're generous, and you have these different like, and that you learn good habits. The outcome isn't as important. And I think my dad, I had this interesting balance, right? Where my mother, she drove me to every soccer game. She drove me to every tennis tournament. Like she drove me to all the basketball games, like all this stuff. I don't think she even knew how to keep score. Right. Like, and I don't think like the game would end. And like, I don't think she would know who won or lost. Right. Um, my dad would certainly know who won or lost. And like now with my kids, I definitely know who won or lost, but I try not to focus on that at the end of the soccer game. So I'm probably a little closer to my dad than my mom. I guess I have, like my mom, I drive the kids to the soccer games and which my dad didn't do. And then maybe like my dad, I'm a little closer to the, paying attention to the score.
I am trying to be aware of this. I'm not married. I don't have kids yet. But as I think about that future reality, I'm aware that there are certain ways I was parented that, like, the more I study, the more I realize how you're parented dictates a lot in your life. And
Yeah.
even if you heal and you overcome things, there are still things that are inbred in you that will pop up. And it's just on you of whether you can properly manage those emotions or those experiences. I'm curious, this relationship with your dad, do you ever have those moments where some of those inbred things pop up and you have to wrestle with those and say, okay, I'm not going to be like my dad in these things to my kids because I did not like it?
I think that the stuff I didn't like from my dad came later. I didn't like, um, I didn't like the anger he had after the divorce towards my mother's side of the family, and I didn't think he should talk about it. I thought he should. If you feel it, you feel it, but like, don't tell me, right? And he would like, I don't know, I'd start to complain about my uncle. I'd be like, Dad, stop! I don't want to hear this, right? Um, and that I won't have because I'm still happily married and everything's great, and I love my in-laws. I think that part of why I run and part of why I've held on to the sport so tightly is because my dad lost his discipline, right? He lost like kid. He was surely disciplined at different points in his life, right? You can't not be disciplined and make it from Bacone, Oklahoma to where he made it. He worked as hard as anybody, but by the time he was an adult, he was chaos, right? He couldn't keep anything organized. He couldn't finish a project. He couldn't he just couldn't. He like couldn't make a deal. He couldn't like solve a problem without going to court. And so I have held on to running partly as a way to like force this discipline, right? In the sense that like I worry that if I ever stop running, like maybe I'll lose some of the other discipline, and that's very much in reaction to my father. Like I don't want to be my father. When I was 40, I put this in the book. You wrote on my Facebook page, all men's lives fall apart at 40, right? Congratulations, happy birthday, son. But things are going. It puts it publicly. He doesn't like send me an email, right? And so I try very hard not to be him. It's funny. No, it's funny. It's interesting. you asked me when the book started. Another place this book started is when my father died in 2017, 8 years ago. And I was flying back. He lived in the Philippines when he died. And I was flying back, and I wrote a letter to my children about what he meant to me. And in some ways, that was kind of the origin of the book too, because it was like part of the process of writing, like 6,000 words on the airplane home. Part of the process of writing allowed me to kind of think through the meaning of my dad.
So good. So good. So many questions off of that. I'm trying to think which is most pressing or prevalent here. I guess in terms of the sport and running, I'm sure I asked you, similar questions last time you came on the podcast, but I'm always fascinated with someone like you. You're a hard worker. You might look like a runner now, but I bet if you channeled that work ethic into football growing up, you'd have veins popping out of your muscles, and maybe you could have played D1, or you never know. So just the idea
not,
that,
but I appreciate the comment.
well, just the idea that like you are a very driven, and the people I talk to are very driven, disciplined people, and probably could have gone far in other pursuits. Maybe not world records like you've done in running, but could have gone far. Why running to you? What makes it special? And at the point where your dad no longer, could force you to run, or you didn't feel necessarily this pressure to run, why did you continue? And what are some of the special things about the sport that make you continue to pursue it this day?
I think that there's one of the things about running ties into what you said earlier and about the simplicity of it. Like, I can't imagine, or it would be very hard for someone to be as focused on another sport and have a job as hard as mine, because every sport is harder to schedule and harder to do, right? Like, I can train for, an elite marathon completely on my own schedule, completely on my own time, and I can adjust it as need be, right? And, I can sneak in runs whenever I want. I can run at 5 a.m, right? And so there's something about running that is compatible with a busy life because it's so much more flexible. But that's kind of that's sort of a simple look at it. I also think that there's a habit of mind that running creates. So again, back to the simplicity. What you learn in running is that your successes are yours, your failures are yours. And what you also learn in running is that if you go out and do the work, you get better, right? And if you don't go out and do the work, you don't get better, right? And it's like, and not only is it, do the work, you actually have to go out every day, right? It's pretty nasty outside my window right now. It looks like there's sleet coming down. It's windy, it's cold, right? You have to run in that. And then you have to, a couple days, a week, you have to run to the point where you're really hurt, right? And so if you do that, you get better. If you don't do that, you don't get better. And so you learn this kind of stoic discipline that I think is super helpful for the rest of life, because the lessons of running don't completely apply, like sort of periodization, threshold runs. That doesn't really apply to getting good at doing board presentations, but there's a lot of overlap. And so I think that, running as a discipline has really benefited the rest of my life. And so I'm grateful that I did it. To your question about whether I could have taken, again, so it's kind of a roundabout way to answer that question. I have all this discipline I apply to my work life, right? I work really hard. I have all this discipline I apply to my running life. I run really hard, right? Which is the chicken, which is the egg? And had I been a football player, I don't think I could have bulked up. I'm tall and skinny. My brain would have gotten smushed. And maybe they're different habits of mind, right? So I have no idea whether life would have ended up the same.
There's this quote from, I think, Seneca, maybe Marcus Aurelius. The body must be treated rigorously so that it's not disobedient to the mind. And I thought of that going back to what you were talking about, 2 responses ago about your dad and discipline and the benefits of discipline. How much do you view, even off of your words there, the benefit in your work life through your discipline of running? Something we talked about a lot last time was you literally run commuting to work. It's something you've kind of become known for. I'm sure other people in the office think you're absolutely crazy for doing so, or maybe respect you, or a little bit of both. How do you view discipline in tandem with your success in the corporate life?
I think that I think that quote is great, right? I do think they're connected. I do think physical discipline does lead to mental discipline. I do think that mental discipline can lead to physical discipline. Obviously, the two things can compete with each other, right? You run too much and you're disciplined, you have less time to work. You work too hard, you have less time to run. But but I think that they're in general quite compatible, and they reinforce each other, and that um, there are also some other interesting ways they connect. Where I barely drink, I never get drunk, right? And like in parks, I got to get up early and run. Well, that's pretty helpful. It's not totally helpful because there's some work situations where it's valuable for networking and all that, but like there's lots of like habits of the body that kind of prepare you, like working hard. And I don't know, I haven't missed a day at work being sick in 15 years, right? Something like that, right? Like, it's in part because of the discipline of running and diet and eating and being healthy and all that. So there are all kinds of ways that a running lifestyle can reinforce a kind of professional lifestyle. There are ways they can push against each other, right? Like one of the things that's so interesting to me is running can make you totally egotistic, or egotistical. And being successful at a job probably requires you to be, the opposite, right? If all you care about is yourself, you're not actually going to get that far. I mean, some people can, but usually that sets you back because nobody likes you, right? And you don't get the allies, and you can't, like, in order to succeed in this world, you need to be able to work with people. And so there are some habits of mind in running that can like hurt you, but I think there are many more that can help you. Here's one more that I think is important. You learn this other thing in running, which is so interesting, which is pacing, right? And you learn, like, you go out and you're I'm going to go run 8 miles at threshold, and you go, and like, that's pretty hard. Like, what exactly is threshold, and what can I hold for 8 miles? Like, it's a good challenge. Like, what is the fastest speed that I can hold for 8 miles? Or even better, let's do a cut down run, right? I'm going to start at A, and every mile is going to be faster for 8 of them. And the goal is to get as fast as possible on your average speed. It's like a great challenge. And what you learn in that is how to adjudicate the effort, right, you put into something, right? And you learn, like, not to go too fast, and you learn not to go too slow. And like the habits of mind that you force through like a pacing workout or a cut down workout are so valuable in like everything in life, because okay, here are the things I have to get done today, right? These are the number of, this amount of time I have to get these things done. This is the amount of free time I have. This is the amount of, like, these are the meetings I have. Okay, now let me adjudicate what I'm going to do and what I'm going to do now. It's not that different, right? And there's skills that you learn going out on that threshold run that are really helpful.
The worst is an 8 mile cut down. I used to do 7 mile cut downs in high school, and you'd go too fast on like mile 4, and then mile
And
5.
then you feel terrible, right?
Yeah.
And so you learn not
It's
to
more
do
of a
that,
brain
right?
game too. Like, cause I think cut down workouts are some of the most beneficial for your mind. Cause if you're
Totally.
hurting early on, it's not about holding the pace. It's like, I have to get faster 4 more times, you know?
Yeah.
So
It's a great workout to do. Yeah.
talking about some of your dad's accomplishments that you shared with me, and a lot of the sort of aura around his name and what people were saying about his potential and, next president, XYZ. Do you ever feel those, I don't have the word for it, but those pressures or expectations on yourself? Because I think you might be different, but maybe me and my pride with my dad, I think there's always, as a son, you want to eclipse what your father or grandfather did, and you want to kind of take your lineage to new heights. And so I imagine you hear those things, about your dad, and there's probably some intrinsic drive to go and be even greater than he was. Do you feel that pull? And if so, how do you wrestle and make sure that you're staying in a sustainable line of pursuing greatness in a holistic way?
I don't think I ever felt, I don't think I ever felt I never felt a competitive pressure against him. I never felt motivated to do more than he had done. And certainly, if I ever felt motivated to do more than my grandfather did, I'd be cooked, right? The guy who like served every president from Roosevelt to Bush. Um, um, I did feel a failure to live up to expectations, right? I did great in college. Everybody thought I was a superstar, right? And had a wonderful, wonderful track record in college. And then, I was garbage in my 20s, and I couldn't figure out what I was doing. And the stuff I did try to figure out, I didn't do very well. And I couldn't get hired anywhere. And I had a couple good jobs and some good mentors, and I learned some useful skills. But, if you had said to the Nick at age 21, who's graduated from Stanford with all these accolades, that, you're going to by the time you're 29, you're really not going to have done anything. I wouldn't have been psyched. And so I felt the failure. I felt the failure to live up to expectations, and I felt a little bit like I was repeating my father's path, um, as well. So that was hard.
I know your father's passed away, but if he could read this book, what do you think his thoughts of it would be?
I think about that a lot. And there are a couple of friends of his who were extremely close to him, who I've sent the book to, and I haven't heard from yet. Um, and there's two of them in particular. I have lots of his friends have read the book, and but they didn't know the totality of him, right? Maybe they were friends of his at Stanford, or maybe they were like gay friends of his in Washington in the '80s. But people who understood his whole life. I think that what he would say is, I think he would say he loved the book and that he wished he had done a better job at certain things, and that I think he would be really, hurt's not the right word, but I think he would, the realization that, so one of the things that happens in the book is that I found all these old letters and diary entries of my dad, which I didn't see until after he had died. And they describe his, like the hardest moment of his life, which is in the late 70s when his father, my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, not the one who was so politically successful, the other one, his grandfather is falling apart drinking, and then comes up, they get in a screaming fight, and granddad threatens to kill himself as part of the screaming fight. And my father writes about this as being the worst moment of his life. And, why can't this man who has all these professional failures stop drinking? Why would he put these burdens on his son? Can't the guy just take care of his own business? And I think my father, reading this book, would have an awareness that he might not have even had in his whole life, that he was just repeating exactly. It's so weird that he's threatening to kill himself to me, and that he can't get a hold of himself because of his drinking, and that he's suffering from his own professional failures. I think that that would have just been, he kind of would have felt smacked in the face, but he also would have known it was true. So I think he would have had that reaction. But I also think he would have loved the book, and he would have loved the story of my running, and he would have been grateful for the forgiveness. And I quote some of the letters he sent to me at the end of his life. He wasn't unaware of the burdens he'd put upon his children.
Earlier on in our conversation, I spoke of the simplicity of running, and maybe subconsciously I knew this because I've read this, but I have the book open in front of me, and the first line when you open up the book is, for Nicholas Thompson, running has always been about something more than putting one foot in front of the other. And so it seems like you have taken some of the more complex route.
Yeah.
What to you makes running more than one foot in front of the other?
I feel like running, it opens up these really complicated thoughts about yourself. So what I was trying to do in the book was to describe what running had meant to me, and how it helped me deal with my sickness, how it helped me deal with different stages in life. But then part of what I was trying to get across is I read about all these different runners and the way they see the world changes. So to pick one example, there's a guy, Michael Westphal, who, he beats my father in a race in 1981, loses to my son in a race in 2021. And he's this incredible carpenter out in this tiny island in Maine. And he becomes a great runner running on this 2-mile road on Cranberry Island. And the 40 people on the island, and 7 of them become sub 3-hour marathons. It's amazing. And then when he's 49, he gets a little shake in his shoulder. He's a big, powerful carpenter, builds all these houses, and then it turns out it's Parkinson's. And so, I read about my own experience of running after cancer, but for Michael, there is no recovery, right? You don't recover from Parkinson's. And so you have to make a choice, right? And the choice is, do I hide this and do I give up on my running, or do I figure out how to do it? And at first he chooses the former. He gives up and stops running. And then he's like, you know what? I love running. And so he learns how to tie his arm behind his back so it doesn't flail too much. And he learns how to get help so he doesn't suffocate himself putting on a sweatshirt. And he runs a 3:16 marathon with full-on Parkinson's.
Wow.
And he wins his age group in all these big races, despite the fact that he's literally falling down because he's flailing. And it's this incredible story about resilience and about how you cope with things, and also like what running teaches him. And he's like, I spent my 20s and 30s using running as a way to beat people, and now I use it as a way to build community and as a way to be alive. And so what I was trying to capture in this book is what running can mean to different people and how it can like help you through the hardest stuff in life.
I think a lot of runners can think back to how the sport is always there for them, right? You spoke to earlier, you can always just go out the door and do the
Yeah.
thing. And you've lived a lot more life than me. So I'm curious to ask you a question around what runs do you remember most in life? And let's talk about the more simple ones, right? Not the records, but like do you remember, I don't know if you ran the day of your wedding, but that, or the first run after your father passed away, or after you had your first kid. How has running been there for you, and what do you remember in those moments where you've almost needed to go to the sport to have that open space of thought?
I remember a run in East Rock in New Haven where I actually wrote the speech for my wedding. And I was like trying like, what am I going to say about my wife? And I remember going up around these curvy roads and like it came to me, right? And I came up with the speech, right? And I don't remember whether I ran on the day of my wedding. My bachelor party, we hiked to the top of Mount Lafayette, the White Mountains, and so I might not have run. I might have been coming down from the mountains. But I certainly remember that run. I remember when I had the hardest professional choice I had to make in my life. I remember I ran up Cadillac Mountain in Maine and like sort of thought through all of these different options. Another time where I had a really hard professional choice. I remember going and running 2 miles with my kids out in Prospect Park, and they were then like 8 and 6 or something. You had 3 boys now, which is the 2 older ones. I remember in high school, like the runs where I remember in particular one run just where I realized that I was like as fast as the cool seniors, right? And when I was a sophomore, and it wasn't a race. It was running in the cold down Salem Street in Andover, Massachusetts, and like, oh wow, and like we're tempoing, and I feel there. I remember at Stanford running up a big hill and like just seeing everybody disappear in the distance. I'm like, wow, I guess I don't have it. I guess I don't have it right now. I remember when I was, I diagnosed with thyroid cancer in December 2005. I'm through with the treatments in like April, May of 2006. And I remember running up a mountain in Colorado in August 2006 and coming down and like, wow, my God, I can still do this, which was incredible. Those are some of the runs.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I love it. What's your, do I think that anyone's 40 minutes into this podcast who's not a runner? Probably not, but let's assume that there might be a few. I mean, statistically, there might be a few, and they might be just passing time on a 20-hour car ride trying to feed themselves some dopamine to get through it. You never know. But let's assume that there are a few people listening who are like, okay, I might want to run for the first time. This sport sounds interesting. What's your elevator pitch to someone of what running can do for your life?
What I say to them is, you don't have to go very far. You can just run to the street light, by your house, or 2 street lights, right? Maybe try 3 street lights. And what you should do is you should try to open your senses when you do it. So like, just think about what you're breathing. Think about what you smell. Think about what you hear. Think about what you see. And think about like what your arms feel like. And just go and like, once you sort of change it from this, I'm going to go out, I'm going to go do this goal, I'm going to run it in, I'm going to write it in my log, right? Like once you change it to like, I'm just going to experience the world and I'm going to feel something, you get something else out of it. And then you start to realize that, oh wait, you can get pretty deep with this sport. And so that's my elevator pitch.
I'm sure you have thought of these 2 things because you're a very thoughtful guy, like legacy and impact. And when you think of the legacy and impact you want the book to have, the legacy and impact you want your life to have, your fatherhood to have, because I'm sure you've wrestled with these things because of your own father, what are some of the core themes that come up around those questions that you ask yourself?
So with the book, I want people to, like, one of the things I've always wanted in life is to like put something beautiful into the world, right? And I was a musician, like I wanted like people to listen to it and like feel the way I feel when I listen to amazing music, like just feel like you're at a deeper level of human experience. And like, that's what I want with the book. I want people to read it and be like, wow, like this, in some way or another, this touched me, this helped me figure something out. This made me cry. This made me like this gave me a better understanding of the world. This gave me a better understanding of my parents. This made me run. I don't know what the emotion is, but like what you're trying to do is you're trying to like help people get to a kind of open up a deeper emotional state. So that's what I want for the book. With my children, they're getting older. The older one's applying to college. Like he's going to be moving out next year, right? And you just want them to feel like I set a good example, that I love them all the time, that I supported them all the time, and that you want them to come out and like be generous, kind, ambitious, curious people. And the world's going to be very different. AI is going to turn the world upside down for them. And just want them to go into the world and treat people well, have a good set of values, and, have known that their parents, loved and supported them. And then for my job, like I have a very specific job. My job is to increase the amount of good journalism in the world as much as I can. And to do that, a little bit through writing, a little bit through editing at different points in my life, and now through designing business models that support serious publications. And I believe that good, thoughtful journalism makes democracy work better, makes America work better. And, industry's under a lot of threat, and there are a lot of powerful people like trying to destroy us and trying to destroy our values and trying to, make it so we're not independent. They're trying to shut down the free press. And like my job is to kind of keep a free, independent press as strong as possible. So that's my professional legacy. If like the New Yorker, Wired, the Atlantic, are all thriving and I played a little role in that, then that's great.
What do you tend to think about on runs these days? Where does your mind go? Are you the type that's thinking about workout splits and races? Are you thinking about, your son going off to college and where you'd like him to go and how you can help? Are you thinking about AI and how it's going to take over the world? What do you think about these days?
All of the above. I mean, like your mind is just this, like, I describe it as like sticks flowing down a river, like, and they just sort of, you follow a stick and then it hits the side and stops and another stick starts flowing. My mind drifts a lot when I run. Sometimes I'm thinking about splits and workouts and goals. Sometimes I'm thinking about, where my son's going to go to college and how I can help. Sometimes I'm thinking about, what is the complicated HR thing I'm dealing with the Atlantic. Sometimes I'm listening to a podcast on AI if I'm just running to work. And sometimes I'm out there like trying to understand like who should be the the starting wide receivers for the Patriots. I don't know, like, whatever's on your mind.
Not a bad team to follow these days with Drake May, second year
No,
balling
it's
out.
good. It's the weirdest. The Bruins are doing well too. They're going to end up sucking, but the Patriots have been really great.
What's next for you in terms of, it's the worst question you can be asked after pouring your heart into a piece, but it's the brutal reality of nature where you could sell the most impressive book and people always ask what's next. So let's say running and books. Do you have thoughts for more?
Well, running is going to keep going. So, my goal, I had like set up my season goals, and the goal was to like, take a crack at the 50-mile American record in the spring, run a sub 5-minute mile on my birthday, run, top 10, do great at 100K, get my Western States qualifier, and then win my age group at the Abbott World Championships. And I did everything exactly right except for shanking the New York Marathon at the World Championships. So now I'm trying to figure out like what happened there. If it was just a respiratory infection, then I can probably run another marathon in the next few weeks and feel good about it. If it was like, if there's something deeper, if I have like a cortisol problem or I just like overcooked myself. I also ran the Grand Canyon like a couple weeks before the marathon, which probably wiped me out. I'm trying to figure out whether I need to take a long break or whether I don't. So that's the goal this week. The marathon was like 10 days ago. Next year, the running goals will probably be like take a crack at the 50-mile record again, maybe take a crack at the 100K record, maybe run the Boston Marathon, maybe run New York, and then run a lot with my eldest son who's getting really into it. Writing wise, I have no idea. There's no other book. There's no like, I'm just doing my job. I definitely have been collecting stories of other runners, maybe I'll write something now, but I have no idea if there's going to be another book. It was 15 years ago that I wrote my previous book, so I've got some time.
So I can get you back on the podcast in 15 years. We'll talk about
2040, I'll have my third book.
I love it. I'll have to connect you to a friend. He is launching this company. I am friends with all sorts of founders. I think this is going to be $1 billion company in a couple of years, a
Cool.
decade. But it would help you find out whether it was respiratory or something else. So it's
Oh, really?
basically, yeah, it's the science of bioenergetics. Let me just
Hmm.
explain it to you this way. So there's a health scan and then there's a endurance scan. The health scan, my parents took my sister who had autoimmune disease issues for 10 plus years to doctors all the time, all around the state. No answers. One scan of the health scan, they were like, we know what you have and we can heal you. So crazy
Wow.
stuff there. But then he has an endurance level of it. And the easiest way to explain it is Josh is the founder. He took the scan, the beta of it as he was developing it, and it told him he had Achilles tendonitis. He's like, what? My Achilles feels fine. 2 weeks later, it develops Achilles tendonitis. So how
Oh my
I
God.
explain it is it's a crazy amount of information that they get, but then they
Yeah.
work with, from my understanding, like researchers from MIT, and they use AI and all the tools we have now to distill all this information in just wild ways. So
That's cool.
I'll have to
All
get
right,
you hooked
great.
up there. That might
Yeah, hook
have
me up and
to
maybe
fuel your record pursuits in the years to come. I think you'd appreciate it. They're
that'd be
developing
great.
it
And
all
then I can
now.
figure
So
out what's wrong with me. That'd be awesome.
yeah. Final few questions. One of
Yeah.
those is, I think people, including myself, I'll be honest, our phones, man, stimulation, dopamine. People use runs now to listen to music, listen to podcasts, have work calls. And so when we're presented with runs with just our thoughts, it actually can be quite scary because we don't sit in silence. We don't sit with our thoughts anymore. And so I'm curious to ask you, what do you think the value of being with your thoughts, even if they're scary, is in the sport of running? And how do you view stimulation, music, podcasts, talking to friends on the phone with just being with your thoughts in the sport?
Such a good question. I do think that part of the reason people are going into marathons is because they recognize what our phones are doing to us. So, obviously, our phones are incredibly useful and incredibly toxic. Like, turn off all notifications. Set limits for yourself. Right. Like, do all the things like. You know, don't have your phone in your bedroom. Right. All like never sign up for a streak. Right. Like, be aware of all the ways these. If you've used Twitter too much, delete it from your phone and don't put it back. Right. Just like we all have to be very intentional about limiting the amount of time. My kids, where I was like, we put screen time on our kids' phone. They're like, the kids don't need screen time, the adults need screen time. And it's true, right? Um, we're all slaves to these devices in some ways. But that's all obvious, and everybody knows that. I do think that running is a way to counter it. I do think the reason that 55,000 people ran the New York Marathon and countless more registered for it is partly a reaction to this, partly a reaction to the TikTokification of our world. And I do think that sometimes when you run, you just need to release. Like I listen to podcasts when I'm just running to work and I'm trying to catch up on the world. I listened to this interview tonight. I got to interview this guy. It's complicated. I got to catch up on the podcast, right? So yesterday I was listening to him while running in Los Angeles. But most of the time, I do think that you let it go. And if you're ever doing a workout, you can't listen to music. You can't listen to podcasts, right? Because you're trying to like understand how your body moves quickly through space. But I also think it's really important to have meditative time. I think that if you're constantly stimulating yourself, you're doing yourself a disservice. So I do think that it's very important to like turn it off at times when you run.
For those who are interested in following you further, helping you out, I don't see how you can't listen to the man, the myth, the legend, Nick Thompson for 50 minutes and not want to help you out. What's the call to action for people? How can they help you? How can they help this beautiful piece of art, even more than just buying a copy? What can people do to help you out on this journey and this mission of getting this remarkable, not story, but stories, as you'll come to
Yeah.
find out if you buy the book, out to the world?
Well, I want people to read the book, right? And so what I love, folks are like, buying the book is great. Posting about the book on Instagram is great. Sharing the book with someone who either is a runner or is obsessive about something, don't have to buy a new copy. Give them your copy. You know, I did this thing on LinkedIn where I was like, look, I just want people to read this thing. And so I set up this form. I was like, if you have a reason why you want to read this book and it's really important to you, tell me and I'll send you a book. And I had like, I think I've sent out 500 books so far, right? Where people have written in and they're like, I love what you wrote about your father. Like, I really want to understand my father. And so send them a book. I want people to read it. I care a lot about it. It's definitely the best thing I've ever written. You can, I don't know, put it on. I just share it the way you share things. It's hard to get people to read, right? It's hard to get bookstores to stock, right? Like, it's hard to make the list. Like, look at the bestseller list. You're going to get books about Abraham Lincoln, books about Trump, books by Ozzy Osbourne, really famous people. Those things are great. Some of them are amazing. But it's hard to get a book into the world. So if you love it, share it. That'd be great.
And perfect time of year. Buy good stocking stuffer, right? Family.
Great. It's a good Christmas book. Buy it for people who don't understand running. Like, some of the best reactions have been from the spouses of runners who are like, now I understand it. Now I get it. Right now I see why this person does this. Yeah.
Amazing. Nick, final question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite fall thing? We're coming up on Thanksgiving. I probably asked you the Gordon Ramsay question I ask everyone. So second time around, just a basic question. Fall's my favorite time of year. Yeah. Favorite drink, favorite activity, favorite movie. If you had to pick one, what is it?
Always for the fall, watch The Lives of Others, which is a movie about, the end of the Cold War. And I'm always reminded of it in the fall because of all that happened in the fall of '89. So that's one of my favorite movies. This just popped to mind. There you go.
I'll watch it this weekend. That's my homework.
Yeah, it's so good.
Nick,
it's such a good movie. So good.
Thank you for blessing me with your time, your wisdom. I'm going to go for a run. That's how hype I am after this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Dominic.
All your
It's so lovely to talk to you. Thanks for your awesome
man.
questions. Thanks for supporting the Running Ground.